Ravens flock, the flock rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. The flock rundown. Nothing gets better than waking up and wondering how high we can fly. Tune in.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
Appreciate you, Ray. What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown. We got a lot to get into today. We'll start with the Ravens injury report, practice report. It's looking great this week. Everybody's been practicing. The only person who didn't practice today was Arthur Millette. He's obviously just coming back off of that injury, so I'm not expecting him to play this week anyway. He returned to practice yesterday. They're probably just giving him a day off. And then fifth-round rookie running back Rasheen Ali returned to practice today, so that officially activates his 21-day practice window. I do expect him to get caught up in the next few weeks until Keaton Mitchell comes back, and then I think there's definitely an interesting decision to be made there because we're not going to bring up four most likely, and obviously Derrick Henry and Justice Hill are locked in. So when Keaton Mitchell returns, whenever that is, probably later in the season, they're going to have to make a decision with Rasheen Ali, probably just move him back to the practice squad, I guess. But I wouldn't be surprised if he gets called up in the next few weeks to the active roster just to be that third depth guy. I would like to see some runs from him, too. We haven't seen a ton of Rasheen Ali. He's also been in and out of training camp and things like that. But good to see that he's back at practice, ready to go. Shout out to Derrick Henry, AFC Offensive Player of the Week, coming off of that 199-yard rushing game, 2 touchdowns, should have been 3. He has been such a piece for us, man. And we knew this, obviously, when we signed him in the offseason, but I just can't talk about it enough, how meaningful Derrick Henry is to this offense and to help Lamar and this entire team hopefully get over the hump and win a Lombardi this year. I'm expecting another strong Derrick Henry game this week. I think we can run all over the Cincinnati Bengals, and he stacks a couple of those games up. He'll be AFC Player of the Month like we just got on defense. Shout out to Kyle Van Noy, first one ever AFC Defensive Player of the Month. He's had 6 sacks in the last 3 games, 2 sacks each game. It's just mind-blowing what he's doing at his age right now. And I'm so glad we re-signed him, man. He's been a huge piece to this pass rush unit and just this defense in general. Not only production on the field, but also just a veteran leader in the locker room. And I think he keeps guys like Odafe Owe and Matabike and Ajabo and a lot of these guys locked in. He's the veteran glue to that room. You know, he's got more experience than pretty much everyone in the pass rushing room combined. So shout out to Kyle Van Noy. Shout out to the entire pass rush unit. We're going to add Yannick Ngakoue to that room very soon whenever he gets elevated from the practice squad. So very high on our pass rush unit this year that we were pretty skeptical of in the offseason. Not skeptical, I guess, but concerned. You know, it was one of the thinner positions, I would say. We were talking about how stacked our secondary was, but when you looked at the pass rush unit, it was some question marks. You know, is Odafe Owe going to step up and be the guy? So far, yes, absolutely. He's got 4 sacks through the season, and I think the most he's ever had is 5. So he's already about to tie his most sacks in a season. If he gets 1 sack against the Bengals, he'll tie his best season ever, and we're only in week 5. So Odafe Owe's balling, Kyle Van Noy's balling. Just wishing these guys continued success and wanted to celebrate and acknowledge how good this pass rush unit has looked so far to start this season. Marlon Humphrey spoke to the media for a while yesterday, and in the midst of his press conference, he mentioned that Ed Reed left them a secret message on the board, specifically for the Ravens secondary, in the Ravens secondary room.
Ed Reed left a message on our whiteboard. I noticed it first, but just so y'all know. But he just wrote something on the whiteboard, and it was just talking about communication. And he just wrote 20, so I was like, that's kind of cool. You know that's Ed Reed, but I wonder if I wrote 44, what people know, but. So it was. He left the message, just communication. That's the biggest thing for a secondary. Communication. And it's not that we were doing a bad job of it, but it wasn't perfect. And in the secondary, the communication's got to be perfect in order for the play to be good.
When did he leave that message?
Honestly, I don't know. Like, honestly, we might have missed it. I mean, he kind of put it. It wasn't like just right there in the open. It was kind of. I'm not gonna say it was. It was kind of. I'm not gonna say it was hidden, but you really wouldn't have noticed it if you weren't really looking. And so I don't have no idea when he came here and put it up there, but we saw it, and it's definitely going to stay on that board for the rest of the year.
I think it's really special that Ravens legends like Ed Reed and Ray Lewis are still so involved with the team, especially to the extent of Ed Reed going into the Ravens secondary meeting room and leaving a message up on the whiteboard and signing it 20 so that they know. I think that is so impactful to a unit, a very talented unit as is. There's no doubt about it. The Ravens secondary is stacked. And there were a lot of miscommunication issues early in the season. And that could just be rust on their part by not playing a lot of games, not playing in the preseason. It could be Zach Orr, new defensive coordinator. There's a lot of reasons why your communication in the first few weeks of the season is not on point. And that secondary's got a tough matchup this week against Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They always cause problems for our secondary and every secondary in the NFL. And it's not the same formula that you can just roll over from the Bills game. You got to be a little bit more conscious of them beating you in one-on-one situations because Chase and Higgins can beat our corners, can make a contested catch over our corners. Not every time, but I'm just saying they're going to make more plays than Shakir and Coleman did. I think Chase and Higgins are a lot bigger of a threat. And Joe Burrow is obviously a great quarterback. He can get him the ball. So there's a lot more responsibility on our secondary this week. Hopefully they're locked in communication, taking Ed Reed's advice. Now I want to dive into some of your questions that you've been asking in the comments. Kind of a new segment, but a couple episodes throughout the week, usually probably on these update episodes. I'm going to answer your questions at the end of the video. Some of you guys have some great questions. So if you ever have any questions or topics that you want me to discuss, just drop them in the comments. I'll grab some of them and we'll do a new segment at the end of some of these update episodes. So let's dive into these questions. We got 3 of them today. The first one is from Nick D. Double question here. Shout out Nick D. So he asked, even though we have needed to throw deep balls, I think he meant haven't. Even though we haven't needed to throw deep balls, does it concern you that we haven't thrown them and connected in game? And then the second part of the question is, how big of a lead do we need to have when we should turn to second team reps? These are good questions. I've been thinking about this myself. The Ravens haven't needed to throw or push the ball down the field consistently in any way in these last few weeks. So with the run game as strong as it is, we're not really practicing, at least from a game rep standpoint. I know they probably practice their passing game all the time in actual practice, but from a game rep standpoint against another opponent, we're not getting a lot of practice pushing the ball down the field. So am I concerned about that? Slightly. I definitely think there's a little bit of concern that when we need to, let's say we're down 2 scores or 10 points in the Bengals game this Sunday for whatever reason, they get out to a hot start and we got to move the ball a little quicker. We can't just keep running like we are, or the run game maybe gets slowed down by a team in the next couple weeks. Are we equipped to zip down the field, pushing the ball through the air? We're definitely equipped to do it, but I understand your point about rust, and I feel like there will be a couple timing issues, a couple drops, from the receivers not being highly targeted and not in the flow of the game. If you've ever played football or just from even watching football, you've probably realized that it's important to get your guys the ball early in games to get them in the flow. We saw last week Mark Andrews had that wide open crossing route and he dropped the ball because he's rusty, man. He's not getting many targets, and now it's his job to still catch that ball. It's not an excuse, but I'm just saying when you're only getting one random target a game and 99% of the other times you're just blocking or running a route, not even getting looked at, it takes you out of the game a little bit. It's hard to be as sharp as if you're running routes knowing, hey, there's a high chance the ball's coming to me. So guys like Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, likely, they're not getting a lot of targets right now. And that is a little bit concerning for when we need it. So on one hand, I would love for the team to start pushing the ball down the field more, start practicing it more in game. And I think that they'll sprinkle that in even this week against Cincinnati. I think there's going to be opportunity to really utilize the play action. But on the other hand, you got to do whatever it takes to win the game that week. And if we're running and able to get out to quick leads and just put these teams away, then you're not going to see a ton of the ball getting pushed downfield. And then I am a bit concerned that when we need to do it out of nowhere, there's a chance that we make a lot more mistakes. There might be a holding penalty. Lamar might sail the ball or underthrow it. There might be a receiver drop or they ran the wrong route. There's just so many little things that could happen that when you're not in the flow, when you're not doing it often throughout the game, that could come up. So I totally understand your point. I would say I'm slightly concerned. I'm at like a 3 out of 10 right now that if we need to rely on the passing game consistently, that we'd be able to actually go out and execute. And it's not any fault to the guys that are out there. I know Lamar is capable of executing a dominant pass game. We saw that last year with a lot of these guys, with Zay Flowers and Rashad, who I know is not super involved, but he was out there, and Nelson Aguilar and Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews. We have the weapons, Justice Hill even in the pass game. So we definitely have the weapons to do it, and I'd like to see us sprinkle it in more and more, and I think we will. As the season goes, as teams start to slow down the run game a little bit, they're going to really sell out to slow this run game down so we don't just keep running through teams. When they do that, the passing game is going to open up a lot more, and I think we'll get those necessary reps to evolve this passing game into something dominant so that we can truly be multiple at a high level. I rambled on forever about that first question, so I'll answer the second question quickly. How big of a lead before the backup should come in? I would say it should always kind of be in the fourth quarter. You don't want to ever put the backups in too early. I don't know. I'm comfortable with 3-score or more lead in the fourth quarter, less than 10 minutes left, something like that. You don't want to do the whole fourth quarter. You never know. We've seen some blown leads pretty quick, but I feel like if you're up 3 possessions and there's 9 minutes, left in the game, 8 minutes left in the game, it would be ridiculous to blow that lead. You could probably throw the backups in, but with the way the Ravens have blown fourth quarter leads, you might want to wait a little bit more. You might want to wait till there's like 5 minutes left. Next question is from Jacob Sims. Is it still the best idea to sit starters all preseason? Teams like us, but many others, came out looking bad. Some of those games could mean a lot in January. I completely agree with you. I think that it has backfired a little bit for the first few weeks of the season, not having any preseason reps. Not just for us, like you said, but for a lot of the league. If you're not getting any starters reps in the preseason, then week 1, week 2, that kind of is your preseason. That is where you're working the kinks out and you're just getting back into football mode. So it is important, I think, to have some reps. Now, on the other hand, I get flashback to a few years ago when the Ravens lost half their team in the preseason, and it seems like since then, since the J.K. Dobbins, Marcus Peters, Gus Edwards, I feel like all that was happening at once. Since that time, we haven't been playing starters in the preseason. I know a lot of veterans don't want to play in the preseason. I get it. There's obviously an injury risk, but I think there is meaning to getting a drive under your belt. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but to get out there against another opponent, put your guys to the test, work some of those kinks out early, some of the communication issues, whatever it may be, just a drive here and there, or maybe a quarter in one of the games. I understand both sides, but I would lean a little bit more towards getting some reps, just a little bit. I know there's injury risk, but I think it's important to get off to a better start in the regular season and not be so sloppy for the first couple weeks, as we saw with the Ravens and many other teams. There's not a lot of high-level football being played in the first month of this season, to be honest with you. If you look across the entire league, it's a weaker year when it comes to like execution from players and coaches. And to your point, some of these games you lose earlier in the year because you're rusty, like let's just use the Raiders game for example, that could come back to bite you later in the season when it comes to making the playoffs or playoff seeding or whatever. So I think it's important to get off to a hot start. It's important to win and be at your best for all the games that count. And I think that playing a little bit in the preseason helps you get to your best quicker. Last question is from _Blee. What's a move you'd like the Ravens to make via trade ahead of the deadline? This is an interesting question. We're going to have a lot of videos about this probably as the deadline gets closer. Right now, Davante Adams is obviously a hot name. I would love any talent that comes our way. I'm not going to be saying that we shouldn't make a move. I don't think we're going to go get a Davante Adams because of contracts and age and a lot of different variables. The Ravens running the ball a lot. And if you would have asked me this question at the beginning of the season or even after the first 2 weeks, I probably would have said we need to go trade for a right guard. But I'm slowly changing my tune, as I would imagine the rest of the fan base is, because we've seen a lot of improvement from this offensive line. We're seeing Falele get better. We're seeing Roger Rosengarten start now and probably won't lose that job, to be honest. So I'm not as concerned about the offensive line, weirdly enough. Now, that could change week to week. So if I were to still point out the weakest part, I would still say probably right guard. If I had to make a move, it may be there, but I don't think they're going to do that at all. And the Ravens roster overall is pretty complete. I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens don't make a move at the deadline, as unsuspenseful as that sounds. I just wouldn't be shocked because there's not a lot of holes. If you are forcing me to make a move just off of it being fun, I'm going to say a wide receiver. Probably not Devontae Adams, maybe a Cortland Sutton, some kind of bigger possession wide receiver, because I think that's our missing variable in the pass game. And Devontae Adams would be a much better trade, don't get me wrong. I just don't think the Ravens are going to do that. I think that the Ravens could target another wide receiver, though, and if I had to make a move, I would probably add more talent there. I think there will be many moments throughout this season where the Ravens are forced to push the ball through the air, and I wouldn't mind having a big body wide receiver who can go up over a corner and go grab the ball. And I think a guy like Cortland Sutton or even a Devontae Adams, if they did decide to go all in like that, I think that those guys would be welcomed additions to this team. But that's it for today, guys. I appreciate you as always for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.